Okay, so now we want to look at the next subtopic, which is inverse trigonometric function. Okay, so we need to look at the inverse part. Okay, for trigonometric function. What is trigonometric function? Sine, cos, tangent x, cosecant x, secant x, cotangent x. What is inverse trigonometric function? Okay, so it will be sine inverse x, cos inverse x, tangent inverse x. This is the notation. Cosecant inverse x. Okay, secant inverse x, cotangent inverse x. Okay, so different. Trigonometric function, we don't have the inverse, but inverse trigonometric function will be sine inverse, cos inverse, and so on. Okay, that is for trigonometric function. Okay, so what does that mean by inverse? Okay, so if you look at here, trigonometric function are periodic, correct? Okay, why we say that it's periodic? Okay, for example, let's say we have y equal to sine x. Okay, so this is sine x. Okay, in between 0 to pi. But basically, it's not only until 2 pi. And it can up to infinity lah. Okay, so it can be any range. Okay, can 0 to 2 pi, or 0 to 4 pi, or 0 to 6 pi, and so on. Or from minus 2 pi to 2 pi, and so on. Okay, so basically it's a periodic function. Okay, so this is one period lah. One period of 2 pi. And they are not one-to-one function. Why is not one-to-one function? For example, if you have one value of y here, 1, so basically it can be more than one value. So here, 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 here. Okay, so we can have more than one value for x. So that's why we can say it is not one-to-one function. However, if we restrict the domain, okay, to choose interval, okay, sekarang ni, if it's not one-to-one function, the domain for the sine x is basically for all r. Okay, it can be up from minus infinity until infinity. Okay, but if we restrict the domain, meaning that it's not from minus infinity to infinity, we just restrict, for example 0 to 2 pi ke, ataupun from minus pi to pi ke, alright? So if we restrict the domain, then restriction function is one-to-one and invertible. What happened? It will be inverse. Okay, so inverse trigonometric function will be a function that is restricted to one-to-one function only and invertible. Okay, alright, so for example, let's look at the first example here, sine function. Okay, so we know that this is a sine function, and if the domain is restricted to minus pi over 2 until pi over 2. Okay, let's say lah kita ambil sini pi over 2, isn't it? Here is negative pi over 2 until pi over 2. Pi over 2 is here. Okay, we just restrict the domain. From minus infinity to infinity, we just restrict to minus pi over 2 to pi over 2 only. Then the fx become one-to-one. Betul tak? If we take any value of x, of y, we can have only one value saja. So kat sini pun one value saja. Tak ada, it's not more than one value lah. Okay, for one value of x, one value of y. For one value of x, one value of y only. So same goes for negative here. So one value of x, one value of y only. Okay, alright. So then, okay, what happened? The inverse sine function is defined as y equal to sine x if x is equal to sine y for minus pi over 2 to pi over 2 and x is from minus 1 to 1. Okay, so meaning that we can have the inverse function if the sine x is only macam mana? Like this only. Okay, where here is pi over 2, here is minus pi over 2. This is the graph. Okay, for y equal to sine x. Okay, alright, therefore for inverse, okay, the inverse will be if we restrict the y equal to sine x, like this only, we restrict the y, and then we convert it to inverse. Okay, we convert it to inverse because we already restrict the sine x. Okay, we restrict and it's become, okay, so this one here, the domain become minus pi over 2 to pi over 2 only, right? And the range for this one is from here lah. We know that it is 1 until minus 1. Okay, so we know that it's from minus 1 to 1. Okay, therefore if you have the inverse, we need to change from domain, okay, it's become range for the inverse, and for the range it's become domain for the inverse. Okay, therefore what happened? So the domain for the inverse, okay, the domain for the inverse become minus 1 to 1, and the range for the inverse become minus pi over 2 to pi over 2. So it's different. Okay, and the graph also will be the other way around. Okay, so since it like this, so it will be like this and this one. Okay, so the domain will be from minus 1 to 1, and the range become minus pi over 2 to pi over 2. So the opposite. Okay, opposite when we have the inverse. So here y equal to sine inverse x. Okay, the opposite one. Okay, so it's clearer for this graph. Okay, so we have the x, we have the y. Okay, so this is graph of y equal to sine inverse x, where the domain right now become from minus 1 to 1, and the range right now is from minus pi over 2 to pi over 2. Okay, range is referred to the y-axis and domain is referred to the x-axis. Okay, so we can write as y equal to sine inverse x, or we can write it as y equal to arcsine x. Okay, so it's give you a same meaning, which is a sine inverse x. Okay, so the opposite one. Okay, because we know that the inverse, we need to have one-to-one function only, so that's why we have the restricted the original function. Okay, and then baru kita boleh cari inverse. Okay, now let's look at the cosine function. Okay, so we know that here is the cos y equal to cos x, and it's not one-to-one function. Betul? It's not one-to-one function because one value of y, for example here, we can have so many value of x. Here one value, here is one value, and another one here. So here also another value for x. Here also another value for x. So kat sini saja dah berapa? Okay, so this one is just within 2, minus 2 pi to 2 pi, isn't it? So we already have 4 value. So it's not one-to-one function. But in order to find the inverse, we need to have restricted domain. Okay, so for cos, we restrict the domain into 0 to pi only. So meaning that from 0 to pi. Okay, so that one is the domain that we restricted. Okay, so here 0 pi over 2 pi. Okay, why we restricted to 0 to 2 pi, not minus 2 pi to 2 pi, pi over 2 like sine? Because if we choose minus pi over 2 to pi over 2, we will have, it's not one-to-one function, isn't it? Because if we choose any value of x, we'll get 2 value. Okay, so that's why it's not one-to-one function. Okay, therefore we need to choose one-to-one function. Okay, so for one-to-one function, it will be from here, from 0 until pi. Okay, so from here we can have one-to-one function only. Okay, so from here, this is y equal to cos x. Okay, therefore for inverse, okay, so we restrict, since here is the domain is become 0 to pi, and the range also is from here, we know that is 1, here is minus 1, right? So from minus 1 to 1. So for the inverse, we already change, so it become the domain here become opposite lah. Okay, range for cos become inverse, become domain to the inverse, so minus 1 to 1 lah kat sini. So the range, okay, akan jadi from 0 to pi. Okay, alright, so this is the ni lah, from y is refer to the range, to the range, and here is refer to the domain. Okay, so what is the graph look like? So this is the graph look like. Okay, the opposite from just now is opposite sini kan, tadi kan. Alright, so here 0 to pi just now, minus 1 to minus 1. So this one is y cos x, so here is y cos inverse x. Okay, so domain jadi range, range jadi domain. Okay, so that's why it will be opposite here lah. Okay, it will be opposite.